moved from the driver's side to the front of the truck with his shotgun, presumably to confront Ahmaud. His right leg shows his knees are bent, his head is looking forward. In the next frame, we see Travis has now stepped back, and this is when we hear the first gunshot. The next frame clearly shows that Travis is being pushed back and Ahmaud has his hands on the rifle. Watch as Ahmaud releases his hands and hits Travis, first with his left hand, then with his right, as the struggle moves out of frame. Greg, meanwhile, now in the back of the pickup, puts his phone down and appears to ready his pistol. Then another shot. And we see smoke coming from the struggle. At 27 seconds into the video, Travis and Ahmaud can be seen again struggling over the rifle. Watch right here. Ahmaud pulls his right hand off to try to hit Travis. This gives way to the final shot. The final frame of the 36-second video shows father and son each holding a firearm standing in the street with Ahmaud Arbery laying on the ground dying.
All right, I want to welcome forensic criminologist Laura Petler, who is here with us, a private death investigator. Also, we have Imran Ansari, who is a trial attorney in New York. Thank you both for joining us. Let me start, Dr. Petler, if I could, with you, because I want you to tell everyone, first of all, how do you look as a forensic criminologist? How do you first start or look at a death investigation to begin with?
The very first thing that we always do, Ashley, is start by studying the victim. We complete a very thorough analysis of everything that we can learn about the victim, from lifestyle to education to employment to personal safety and security and well-being, all the way through medical history, physical and mental, criminal records, everything that you can imagine. I mean, everybody's different. Everyone's life is different. So we start by studying the victim. We've moved from there into the direction that the investigation takes us.
All right, so I want to start with that. That's a perfect place to start with the victim, because we just heard from his mother and he was jogging, we thought, Imran, in a safe neighborhood and out in a sunny day, in the middle of the day on a Sunday, and this is what happened. So what do you think, first of all, as a trial attorney, when you hear that kind of evidence?
Right. Well, the video that we just saw and we have played on CourtTV numerous times is going to be really the best evidence as to what happened that day, Ashley. And as we go into this trial, which would be the state trial, and of course the federal government has hate crime indictments on all these individuals, it's going to play a large role as to what happened that day and whether this defense of justification or self-defense is going to carry any weight. But you see, Ashley, in that video, an unarmed individual essentially trying to get away from pursuers. So this self-defense aspect and defense that we expect to hear from the McMichaels and Bryant is really not going to carry weight, in my opinion. Is going to be a very hard affirmative defense on behalf of the defense to put forward before that jury in state court.
All right, so Laura, you know, perfectly said that you go where the investigation leads you, and Imran just took us there, which is you have this video. So a video doesn't capture everything. You can't see what's on each side of the road and where, what could have happened on the sides of the road. So take us through, if you would, from your perspective, again, from a forensic analysis, what you do once you have a video. What's next? What do you have to consider about what you see in the video and what you may not see on the video?
So understanding everything about the victim is critically important in this case, because we want to understand how he moved around from the back of the white truck to the right side of the right truck and then all the way to the front of the truck. And then not only that, but we want to understand the personalities and what was normal routine behavior for both of the shooters, or the defendants in this case. The shooter, who is Travis McMichael, standing on the ground in front of the driver's side door, and then his dad, who's in the back of the truck. Both of them appear to have firearms, and and the victim is running around the front of the vehicle, and then a struggle ensues between the gentleman on the ground and the victim in this case. So we want to look for bloodstain evidence. We also can use types of reagents that can help us identify where gunshot residue is, either like on the door, on the ground. Sometimes it's easier in a closed location, but there's a lot of forensic application that can be done at that particular type of scene to be able to reconstruct trajectories and to get everything going to where it needed to go to understand a glimpse of the event.
All right, and Imran, what type of physical evidence do you think is important in this case? After seeing the video and looking at that next step, what is compelling to you that you think makes a difference in a trial like this?
Yeah, in terms of physical evidence, Ashley, I think we're going to be looking at what was recovered after the fact. We know that there was no police response necessarily in terms of a investigation into the McMichaels at that immediate time. I think that the evidence that's going to be really important here, as I said, is the video. Physical evidence-wise, of course, the firearms that were involved, and we just heard about the what perhaps into the investigation as to the shooting, what they would be looking for. But physical evidence, I think, obviously, the alleged murder weapons that were used, and that would be the shotgun. Also, the video is going to be very telling. And I really think, Ashley, I'm going to say it again. We're going to be seeing this video, just like we saw in the Derek Chauvin trial. The use of the video in that case, in the Ahmaud Arbery trial, is going to be, again, the video that's going to be playing a large role, and the way people will testify as to what you see here. It's an affirmative defense. We're going to hear from the McMichaels. We're going to hear from Brian. You expect to see that testimony unfold in court, and I expect that they will be testifying as to their version of the events in this video. But it's going to be hard to really escape what we see, and I think the jury is going to be focusing on that, and also the other evidence that comes in at trial, and also the delay in terms of the arrests and the prosecution here will be taking a factor into this trial. But I think in terms of physical evidence, and it's not going to be so important as to the physical evidence as the video and the testimony that will explain that.
And I agree with you. What a great point you make, that this video has really been seen around the world. And I think that it is going to be a key piece of evidence. All right, Laura, going back to a video from your perspective as an expert with forensics, when you have a video and do you go through it literally frame by frame to look at every frame to see, was there any physical evidence that we missed, or where was the hand? Was it on the hood of the car? Because we know that's some of the physical evidence. And when they were struggling on the ground and the shooter was there and the victim was there, where exactly was the placement of hands? Is that part of the analysis in determining what happened that day?
Yes, Ashley, it absolutely is, especially in claims of self-defense, because once a victim, or if the victim is allegedly the assailant in what would be a self-defense case in this particular situation, the aspect of how many times is the victim shot, and then how does the victim make purposeful movement after that shot. You can see that in the video that the two men are struggling. There's a firearm between them. It appears that the victim in the case is trying to remove the firearm or point that firearm away from him so he doesn't end up shot. He ends up shot at least one time, and then we see that he can make some purposeful movement by trying to run up the street a little bit, where then he unfortunately succumbs to his injury and collapses on the ground. It's an extremely tragic event that we see there in the video. So as analysts, we're going to be studying each individual frame of that and trying to help all the attorneys that are involved understand the dynamics and the characteristics of this type of a homicidal pattern. It's very specific to self-defense cases, where what is the actual ability of the assailant or who becomes the victim to be making purposeful movement after the shot? Is there a threat after the time of the shot? And in this case, you can see the victim run off into the front. He was no longer a quote unquote posing a threat to the defendants in this case.
All right, Imran, what do you think of the self-defense claim or case or potential and what we might see in this upcoming trial?
Well, I think, as I said, Ashley, it's an affirmative defense. So when you bring that affirmative defense into court as a defendant, you're going to have to get on that stand and testify. An affirmative defense of self-defense or justification really doesn't carry any weight if you're not going to take the stand and testify as to why you had a fear and you took certain actions, such as deadly force here, in order to protect oneself or someone else who was an imminent threat of deadly force themselves. So we expect the McMichaels to testify on their own behalf and explain away and support that affirmative defense of justification. Again, with Brian, same thing. If he's coming forward and putting that defense into court, he's going to have to explain to that jury why he had certain beliefs or a certain state of mind as to taking certain actions here. And the McMichaels are going to have to do that in order to put forward that affirmative defense. If they don't do that, it's really not going to carry much weight before that jury.
Imran, what a great point that you might expect to hear from them, from their mouths, if they're going to make that assertion at trial. We are going to take a break here on Court TV, but when we return, we will continue to look at the upcoming trials of the McMichaels and Roddy Bryan with our forensic criminologist, Laura Petler, and trial attorney, Imran Ansari. We'll be right back on Court TV, your front row seat to justice. In South Georgia, after the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, police arrived on the scene. Arbery was breathing when help arrived, but aid was not administered at first. Once the police began their investigation, the defendants in the case appeared to be relaxed when explaining their story to the police. Court TV anchor Ted Rollins has more on the body cam footage of the officers arriving on the scene.
It's going to be a black male, middle of the roadway, looks like about mid-20s.
You're watching the initial moments when officers arrive on scene after Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed in Brunswick, Georgia last February.
Dispatch, tell squad, come on in, the scene's secure.
Yeah, it was just a damn melee, you know.
What we can't show you, but is captured on the police body cam video, are the heartbreaking images of 25-year-old Arbery dying. He's taking his last breaths as blood flows from a chest wound. Everyone here clearly believes that Arbery is dying, and very little can be done to save him. Only one officer renders aid, which he explains to the paramedics when they arrive.
It's like shotgun slug to the center chest. He was on his stomach when I got here. I rolled him over. He stopped breathing a couple minutes ago. It was obvious to me. I told my dispatch 10-7, but he took his last gasp a couple minutes ago. I had pressure on it, but there was nothing I could do.
A few minutes earlier, Arbery was alive, being chased by Greg McMichael and his son Travis. Neighbor William Roddy Bryan is also in pursuit, according to prosecutors, recording it all on his cell phone. One of the officers first on scene recognizes Greg McMichael, who had recently retired as an investigator in the DA's office.
Just stay over there for me, sir. Yeah. Just stay over there. I recognize you now. Yeah. McMichael, right?
McMichael, yeah. That's my son, Travis, right over there.
Okay. Yeah, just hang out over there for me.
Greg McMichael's experience in local law enforcement appears to play a role in how he and Travis are treated at the scene. At one point, Greg tries defending his son.
He had no choice, man.
Then the elder McMichael can be heard consoling Travis, assuring him that it wasn't his fault.
He had no choice.
Both Greg and Travis would go on to explain what they claimed led to Ahmaud Arbery's death.
We've had break-ins and my gun stolen. And we caught him the other day, and Dad was outside and saw him running by, and the neighbors pointing and everything. So
saw who running by?
Him.
Okay.
So we run out to stop him, to talk to him. He took off running. He came over here, stopped. He come out of the truck running at us. I told him stop till he hit me. I had nothing to do. There's nothing else I can do.
William Roddy Bryan also tells his version of what happened.
And Travis really can't get away from him, can't pull up with the shotgun. I think Travis even gets a lick or two in. And the other black guy gets another lick or two in. And about that time, the shotgun gets raised up, and he pulls the trigger.
As the questioning goes on, the body of Ahmaud Arbery lies on the road a few feet away, eventually captured on the body cam video His body is covered up with a sheet.
All right, still with me, forensic criminologist Laura Petler and former prosecutor trial attorney Imran Ansari. Thank you both for staying with me as we continue to break down this case. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Laura Petler, and ask you, during a death investigation, how important is it to take into account the behavior of the two individuals that are now the named defendants in this case, or all three, rather?
The behavioral evidence is paramount to the successful prosecution of this case, and understanding and analyzing it both from the investigatory standpoint and then translating that for prosecutors pursuant to their claim of self-defense. When I'm watching their behavior, especially the son, as he's talking, Travis McMichael, his arms are up in the air. He's wiping his brow, like he's wiping the left side of his head with his arm. His behavior to me is argumentative from the standpoint where he is trying to convince the investigators that he is justified in what he was doing because there are alleged burglaries going on in the neighborhood. I've been parts of prosecutions when I was in the DA's office as the investigator in cases like this, Ashley, where somebody is shot for stealing something on another person's property. In North Carolina, it doesn't fly. That you cannot shoot somebody over property in our state. And so for me, I look at the behavior of these two men, and the elder McMichael is standing at his truck. And when you hear Roddy testifying or talking to the officer, you can see Mr. McMichael, the elder Mr. McMichael, standing in the background, and he's actually like yelling with his hands in the air, like, this happened and this happened. And they're just adamantly defending themselves. And for me, behaviorally, it's indicative of them not being sure and confident in the fact that what they did was justified.
All right, Imran, as a trial attorney, I have to tell you, watching this as a trial attorney, as a former judge, I feel like there's some real opportunity here for a lot of demonstrative aids and evidence, because not only do you have the video that we saw before of what happened in the road, but now you have statements by the defendants, a damn melee. Do you think that the video that we first showed of what happened is really a damn melee? Would you use that in trial potentially?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the video evidence here, including what we get from the body cam footage here, which shows the first moments when law enforcement reaches the scene and the way these defendants are reacting. There is a certain level of body language and statements that come out that the prosecution can use on their case. And I think that they're going to use it. I think this is going to be a very video-heavy case. Both the footage shot by one of the defendants himself, Brian, and also these body cam footage showing the reaction. And I believe that the prosecution will use experts to break it down and give this jury really a picture of what has happened here, and really argue that this was not self-defense. This was cold-blooded murder and motivated by potential racism. Of course, Georgia did not have a hate crime statute at the time and did enact it afterwards. But again, there's that federal case which is looming after the state case, in which they are facing those federal hate crime indictments. But I think that the videos, both on the body cam and from the Brian's phone, or however he recorded it, is going to play a large role here. And the moments after the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the way that these defendants reacted when law enforcement arrived at the scene will be very telling, and the prosecution is definitely going to be using this on their case.
And Laura, do you think that in the minds of the defendants, because you just pointed out they're defending themselves in their statements, and Travis said Gregory, the father, said to Travis's son, "You had no choice." He told the police he had no choice. Do you think that they believe in their minds that this was self-defense?
No, I don't. I don't believe they believe it was self-defense. I think that they were clearly in the middle of the road with firearms as an unarmed man was running up the road. They could have done nothing. he could have, Ahmaud could have run around the truck and kept on running. Or even if the two gentlemen that were, Ahmaud and Travis McMichael did end up in a physical altercation, Travis McMichael could have chosen to drop the gun and let it go onto the ground. So then the altercation could have been just between the two men without the firearm because he did not want to shoot Ahmaud. Also, after Ahmaud was shot, instead of just standing there, in a lot of the self-defense cases that I've been involved in that are actually legitimate self-defense, the person who has done the shooting or injured the alleged assailant has immediately called 911 and rendered aid to the victim.
All right. Dr. Laura Petler, thank you so much for all your expertise for this special segment. I know, Imran, you're going to stay with us. When we return, Court TV legal correspondent Shanley Painter is going to join us to discuss the trial of Robert Durst and a murder mystery in South Carolina. That's next here on Court TV Live. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott. So happy to be with you this Thursday afternoon. Court is dark today in California, and the jury will return to continue deliberating tomorrow in the Jinx murder trial. Robert Durst is on trial for the murder of his longtime friend, Susan Berman. The prosecution is also set to prove Durst intentionally killed his neighbor in Galveston, Morris Black, and also his wife, Kathy Durst. They claim that Susan knew about the death of Kathy and that it was Bob Durst's motive for killing Susan. It has been a marathon of a trial, but it's almost over as we wait to see whether the jury will find Durst guilty or not guilty for the murder of Susan Berman. So happy to bring in Court TV legal correspondent Shanley Painter, who is covering the trial of Robert Durst there live in California. Shanley, let's start with today, if we could, and why we don't have our jury verdict watch clock up on our screen.
Right, well, court is dark today. They did spend over the last couple of days a total of around 6 hours almost working in the jury room, figuring out what to do about Robert Durst. No verdict yet, Ashley, but they will return tomorrow in the afternoon, 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern, to resume the deliberations. We may have a verdict tomorrow, we may not. We have the Friday factor, of course, to consider here, but if they don't reach a unanimous decision, the jury will return next week to resume deliberations. So that's why we don't have the clock going on our screen right now. We did actually hear from the jury yesterday. They sent a note to the judge asking for a demonstrative aid that prosecutor Habib Balian used in his closing argument. It had a calendar with some timeline, key dates leading up to the murder of Susan Berman, about when Robert Durst learned about the reinvestigation into his wife Kathy's death, and how Susan reached out to him via letter and called him several times, how he even sent her some money over the days leading up to her death. It all goes to show motive for the prosecution with that calendar timeline, why he would want to do away with Susan Berman. So it's interesting to me that they were requesting that yesterday from the judge. Of course, the judge ruling, there it is, there's the calendar right there. But the judge said, no, you can't have this piece of evidence because it's not evidence. It's not an exhibit. It was something that was used during the closing arguments, which are not evidence. So we shall see how much longer it takes this jury to reach a verdict, Ashley.
And it's always interesting to me. I think it's ironic that you do have 58 days of evidence for the jury to review. And the first note that they do send out is for something that closing put together, or that the attorney put together for closing argument, that is not something that they can look at. So I know that you're going to keep us updated. I'd like to do a little bit of a deep dive about some of the testimony. And so, Shanley, one of the things we know is that the defense called an expert to try to really give reason for why Durst's memory may be an issue.
They did. The defense only called 2 witnesses in its case in chief. Of course, we know Robert Durst, the defendant himself, spent 15 long days on the witness stand. But before that, we heard about 4 days of testimony from Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, a renowned memory expert, and she gave some key details on her direct about how memory fades over time, that memory can be contaminated. The defense really wanted to use this testimony to pick apart some key evidence for the prosecution, which is a lot of testimony from friends of Susan Berman and those who knew Robert Durst. And remember, these deaths and disappearances the prosecution is trying to prove happened happened decades ago. So this was key for the defense. I want to take a moment to remind our viewers about some of her testimony. Let's watch.
Many people would agree that, you know, without having a PhD, that the longer that retention interval, the less good the memory is going to be. And in fact, we have studied this, and if I were to plot how good memory is as a function of the length of this retention interval, so time is passing, you can expect to see a forgetting curve. It might look something like that. Memory fades over time. But what's not so much a matter of common knowledge is as this memory is fading, as this retention interval is getting longer and longer, as the memory is getting weaker, it becomes more and more vulnerable to what you're asking about, which is post-event information, or we sometimes just call it PEI.
Dr. Loftus, she's like teaching class there inside the courtroom, and she goes on to talk about more of a practical example about how your memory is sort of like the Wikipedia website. I'll let her explain it. Let's watch.
Is it true, or is it the case that the mind records an event fully and stores all of the information somewhere, and you can go back and if you try hard enough, retrieve it?
I don't think that's true. Memory doesn't record everything. There's no evidence, there's no good evidence that it really does.
There's no video camera or tape recorder in your brain.
No, it works a little bit more like a Wikipedia page. I mean, you can go in there and edit it, but so can other people.
If you remember a detail or of some event one way for 15 or 20 years or 30 years, can you go back and say, well, actually, I have a different memory of that very fact or event, and the memory that you now have is a better memory?
Generally speaking, the memories are more likely to be accurate if it's soon after the event itself rather than later. So if somebody has held on to a memory for a very long time and then suddenly says that they have a different memory, it would be a little suspicious.
As you may recall, David Chesnoff in his closing argument really focused in on some of those axioms that Dr. Loftus taught this jury about in her science, in her decades worth of research about how even post-event suggestions can contaminate a memory, like watching the news or talking to someone else about what you may have witnessed or watching a documentary like The Jinx. Chesnoff pointed out to Dean Cooperman as being someone that maybe his memory wasn't accurate, as well as a friend of Susan Berman, Linda Oates, who was a key witness for the prosecution because she's the one who says that Susan Berman told her that she was the one that made a call to the Albert Einstein Medical School to help out her friend Bob. Ashley.
All right, so I have to ask, how is the jury reacting to either the closing argument or this witness's testimony about the issue of memory versus when there was clear direct examination of Durst when he even admitted he was lying? So on one hand, you have the memory issue that could be causing some of it, and then the other hand, Durst admitted he was lying.
That's a huge thing for the prosecution. Lies, 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 and more lies of Robert Durst. How do you know what may be true or what he's perjured himself on? A big theme. And I guess I should also mention Prosecutor Lewin's response to Dr. Loftus. He grilled her for, I believe, 2.5 days on cross-examination while she was on the stand, picking apart her research, her character, her past testimonies, and the science behind her conclusions. So he didn't have much nice to say about her in his closing argument, Ashley, but that was a big point of the prosecution, is that Robert Durst's own testimony really debunks any of the theory about the memory because he can't seem to tell the truth himself. He's a determined liar, according to Prosecutor Lewin in closing arguments. And we wanted to show an example because this was a moment during the prosecution's close where Lewin is in front of the jury and he's giving many examples of what he says are lies of Robert Durst, but this particular one had to do with a man named Danny Cunningham, and he wanted to use it as an example of when Durst was on the witness stand that he could just come up on the spot with lies or explanations new that he had never heard before. So I want to take a moment to listen to how the prosecutor handled this story about Durst's friend, Danny Cunningham.
For Bob Durst, he could have been up there, and I'm surprised that he didn't say, what's the guy's name? Danny Microphone, Danny Jury Box, Danny Bailiff. I mean, listen, it's funny because how does this happen in a trial? This is a bad movie. But that's what happened. That's who he is. That's how he lies. That's what he does.
That's what he does. To give a little bit of a background on the Danny Microphone soundbite, that garnered some laughs from the gallery. The jurors were definitely taking note of that inside the courtroom, but it was a moment on testimony under cross where Lewin saying that recently, before he asked a question about his friend who lived in Northern California, what his name was, and he said Danny Cunningham. He said he made that up on the spot. He had just seen a name previously on a piece of paper, Lloyd Cunningham, and he just came up with that name, and he was surprised he didn't come up with Danny Microphone, Danny Jury Box. So that was a moment really hitting home inside the courtroom. But the defense did take a strategy of trying to counter some of those allegations in the defense closing arguments. So I wanted to play a moment where they addressed the alleged lies of Robert Durst. Let's watch.
Making Bob Durst a liar does not make him a killer. They have to bring evidence, whether it's direct evidence or circumstantial evidence, and there's no direct evidence. If you remove the emotions that the prosecution has played upon, that Bob Durst is a bad guy and that Bob Durst lies and that Bob Durst will lie about anything, and look at what the evidence or lack of evidence is, then you see there's no evidence.
So the defense saying there is no evidence that his story, you should believe Robert Durst's testimony, which has been a contention that he's just an unlucky person. There's a reason, Ashley, that the HBO series is called The Jinx, because that's what he maintains. It just happened that his wife disappeared. It happened that he had to dismember Morris Black's body. It happened upon Susan Berman's body. So will the lies outweigh his luck here for the jury? I have to point out one other big moment on close from the prosecution when Lewin put on the screen how unlucky Robert Durst has been in his life, to really try to hit home and appeal to the jurors' common sense. Does this make sense that Durst's unlucky moments happen to involve Kathy, his first wife, mysteriously disappearing right before her medical school graduation, that Durst happened to be the last person to see Kathy alive, that Susan is murdered just when the reinvestigation into Kathy Durst's disappearance and death was made public, or that Durst happens to find Susan's dead body and sends a note to the police, that famous cadaver note, or that Morris Black pulls a gun on Durst for, quote, no apparent reason, or that Black is accidentally shot during the struggle and Durst dismembers his body to cover it up, or that Durst sits down with Andrew Jarecki and claims that Jarecki is framing him, or that Nick Chavin, his really good friend, falsely claims that Robert Durst confessed to Susan Berman's murder to him. And the Lewin making this point on the screen inside the courtroom saying, is this man really that unlucky, or was this all planned out and he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, Ashley?
And that, to me, just is a great example of how much all of these attorneys prepared, not only for the trial, but for their closing arguments, to have all of that together and ready to convince this jury to either convict or acquit, depending on the side. So, Chandler, you know, you hear that adage, there's no such thing as a coincidence. And I think that part of what this state has effectively done is say, listen, there's not just one death, there are 3 deaths. And one of them, it can be a presumed death because we've never found the body of Kathy Durst, but that it says a lot that you have one person who knows all 3 of these individuals. So certainly I know we're going to want to see what this jury does. I must ask you this, as you were listening to these closings by all of the different attorneys, because all of the attorneys at some point played a role in the respective closing for the state or the client, Did they emphasize, in your opinion, or talk much about, hey, jury, don't forget to use your common sense. Hey, jury, this is your common sense speaking. Listen to this. Did they go that route? Some attorneys do and some don't.
Oh yeah, the prosecution definitely trying to appeal to the common sense of the jurors. I heard it more so during the time the prosecution was closing and arguing before the jury than the defense. And that's something really common that we hear from prosecutors when they appeal to the jurors. These prosecutors, each one saying, use your common sense. You're smart. There's a reason we picked you as a juror in this case. You're intelligent. You're experienced. Don't check your common sense at the door when you go into that jury room to decide this case. And look, it's easy, because we've shown you this, and this. So it was very clear inside the courtroom that these prosecutors hope these jurors do just that.
And I always wonder, sometimes, you know, after a trial, you have the opportunity as attorneys to speak to the jurors, not always, but sometimes. And I've heard when that's done sometimes that some jurors feel like, I know I have common sense. Like, you don't need to tell me to use my common sense because I have it. So it's always curious to me to find out what they think of the arguments and how they received those arguments. We know it's not evidence, so we have to wait and see what happens. One other quick question, logistics, Chanley. Do we have any idea if you think this judge might keep them late in the day tomorrow or start having them deliberate at times that aren't kind of the regular court hours at this point?
All of our guidance right now is the normal court schedule. So tomorrow starting about 1:30 local, 4:30 Eastern, concluding 7:30 Eastern, normal schedule. It's unclear if they're really close and they say, no, judge, give us 5-10 more minutes. We'll have a verdict if he will allow them to stay late. We will find out that tomorrow. But if they do not reach a verdict tomorrow on Friday, they will return the following week to work on deliberations. The feel and the sense is that they could reach a consensus, but actually, we've done this for years. You just never know what a jury will do.
You never know what a jury is going to do. And a reminder to all that it was 58 days of trial. So that's a lot of evidence for this jury potentially to need to discuss. And a murder mystery in South Carolina where a famed lawyer is suspected in the death of his wife and son is what we are going to look at next. So don't go anywhere when we return here on Court TV Live. A South Carolina lawyer whose wife and son were shot and killed back in June turned himself in today on charges related to a subsequent insurance fraud scheme. According to court documents, Alec Murdoch arranged for a former client to kill him so that his son would be able to collect a $10 million life insurance policy. A judge in South Carolina has set a $20,000 personal recognizance bond for Murdoch on charges of insurance fraud, conspiracy, and filing a false police report. Our own Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter has more on this murder mystery.
I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay. Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
That's the 911 call Alec Murdoch made on June 7th, 2021, after finding the bodies of his wife and son shot to death at their South Carolina hunting lodge.
Okay, what is her name?
Maggie and Paul.
Maggie is her name?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And please hurry.
Alec Murdoch told police he discovered the double homicide after returning home from checking on his terminally ill father.
Both died of multiple gunshot wounds. Maggie Murdoch was shot by a semi-automatic rifle, police believe, and Paul Murdoch was the victim of at least 2 shotgun blasts, one to the chest at least, and one to the head and upper arm.
For nearly a century, the Murdoch name has embodied a legacy of power and justice in South Carolina's Low Country. Here in the small town of Hampton, it's virtually impossible to find someone who does not know of the prominent legal family. But recently, the name has become synonymous with tragedy. At the time of his death, 22-year-old Paul Murdoch was awaiting trial, charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence for a 2019 crash that killed 19-year-old Mallory Beach. According to depositions taken in that case, Paul Murdoch illegally purchased alcohol at Parker's convenience store using his older brother's ID. Surveillance video shows him leaving the gas station, towing his father's 17-foot boat. As he exits the store, you can see him raise his arms in a triumphant gesture to his friends. After attending an oyster roast, the 6 friends headed by boat to a bar in downtown Beaufort, South Carolina. And later, Murdoch stumbles on the dock as he and his friends return to the boat around 1 a.m. Just over an hour later, the boat slammed into a bridge piling, and Connor Cook called 911.
What bridge is it? Paul, what bridge is this? Paul, what bridge?
911, where's your emergency? Hello? Police, fire, EMS. Hello?
We're in a boat crash on Arthur Street. There's 6 of us and 1 is missing.
The body of Mallory Beach was found nearly a week later in a marsh about 5 miles from the crash scene. The charges against Paul Murdoch were dropped after his death, but the investigation is ongoing.
We reported, and it has since been confirmed by multiple attorneys who have clients related to the case, that there is an active investigation into possible tampering, possible obstruction of justice related to that boat crash. And specifically, Alec Murdoch is one of the folks who was mentioned in connection with that inquiry.
In another bizarre twist, 3 months after his wife and son were shot and killed, Alec Murdoch called 911 again, this time to report that he had been shot. The family's attorney says someone in a truck shot at Murdoch while he was changing a tire by the side of the road. The injury was described as a superficial head wound. After he was released from the hospital, Murdoch immediately checked himself into a rehab facility to treat an addiction problem, according to his lawyer. Then it was revealed that Murdoch was accused of stealing millions of dollars from the law firm built by his family. And the South Carolina Supreme Court suspended his law license while the misconduct case is investigated. Just another chapter in this Southern murder mystery.
And still with me is CourtTV legal correspondent Chanley Painter, who's been covering this story. Chanley, I almost feel like every day when I start going through all of the great AP and reports about what's going on in legal cases, this case is there more than once a day, because it's almost as if every day there's something new that's being released, or a new fact or a new detail in this really convoluted story.
Twists and turns really every day. You're so correct. And I was just trying to count the number of ongoing investigations, either involving Alec or his family. I've counted up to 6. Paul, his son, Maggie, his wife, who were murdered June 7th. We have the tampering obstruction from that boat crash that happened in 2019. We have the assisted suicide insurance fraud. He's currently being appeared for today and put on bond. The housekeeper also that used to work for his family for a couple of decades, who passed away in a slip and fall in 2018. That was just announced yesterday. It's being reinvestigated. And then also a part of this, another investigation reopened from a teenager who was found deceased in 2015 nearby this area, somehow related to the Murdoch family, not by blood, but connected somehow. They're a part of that investigation. So that's up to 6 different investigations. So every day there's almost a new twist or turn or detail or development in one or all of those cases.
You are not kidding. There's so much I want to talk about. I'm going to bring back to join us trial attorney Imran Ansari. Imran, thank you for staying on with us. So Chanley, first I'd like to ask you this, just to clarify for all the viewers, because it is so many different facts. Alec Murdoch, and he's saying the $10 million policy that he wanted his son to have, and by suicide, that he would be murdered in order for him to have that policy. There are 2 sons. One was killed along with his wife. The other son, as I understand it, works at his law firm. Is that did I get all that right?
Right. it would be his older son. He's the surviving son and goes by Buster Murdoch. And he's accused of being the one that actually helped his younger brother Paul in this 2019 boating incident to give him his fake ID. He used his ID to buy that alcohol and to do this. But yes, that is the surviving family member, someone that his father apparently wanted to set up this, look like someone shot him, murdered him, so that his son could benefit from $10 million in this life insurance policy. It was so sad after all that Alec has experienced that loss, but to think of his son who's lost his brother, his mother, and then would have lost his father too. Such a tragedy.
Right, absolutely. Imran, is this one of those cases of where there's smoke, there's fire? I mean, again, every day there's another circumstance and another allegation and another they're investigating another death.
Yeah, no, it's really incredible. It's such a strange set of facts. And you see with each day, as you mentioned, there seems to be a new twist and turn here, and law enforcement appear to be on it. So you have a lot of strange occurrences in this family. You have tragedy, you have death, you have murder. And then this insurance fraud scheme where essentially Alec Murdoch was going to die in order to get the $10 million life insurance policy to his son. Where does this lead next? Chandler was mentioning there's the housekeeper who died, and it was attributed to natural causes. There was no autopsy ever performed, and there was then a civil settlement where there was it was attributed to a slip and fall. And now law enforcement is reopening that or investigating that, and who knows what's going to happen there. You have the boating accident where a young woman unfortunately lost her life very tragically, but now Paul Murdoch is dead himself. He is murdered. And where will this all go? It remains to be seen, but it's almost unbelievable that so many things can happen to this family. But I think we're going to see this, and this is really the telling of a made-for-cable movie. And I think we're going to see that down the line, too. It's really crazy,
and Alec Murdoch
for lack of a better word.
Right, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but, Alec Murdoch was shot while he was looking at his tire. He was shot in the head when he was outside of his car on a road. So I agree with you. I mean, I keep listening and waiting to see, what's next? Chanley, when you were there live in this community, it's a smaller South Carolina town. There are very prominent family lawyers in the community. What is the sense of community? And give us an idea of the feel of the size of this particular community.
Very rural, very small town. Literally one stoplight in Hampton, South Carolina, Low Country, South Carolina. And this is a name. Murdoch is a name everyone knows in Hampton County, Colleton County, neighboring county, where this hunting 1,700-acre property is, where Paul and Maggie's bodies were recovered, and where nearby where Alec was shot recently. And it's almost, you mentioned the name Murdoch, you say, yes, we know who that is, but then the people wouldn't talk. They wouldn't tell what they know about the family because it's so small town. Everyone talks to each other. But in Hampton, there is the law office where the Murdoch name is not even outside the building of the law office because everyone knows that is where the Murdoch law office is. They don't even need a sign at the property there. It's not far from the Hampton County Courthouse, where inside the one huge courtroom of the Hampton County Courthouse, that's a picture of the law office right there where the Murdochs practiced law for decades. And then at the courthouse, there's kind of a tribute to the 3 generations of Murdochs who've served as the Solicitor General in that district area. So Alec's father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather were all prosecutors, the head elected prosecutor for almost 100 years until his father unfortunately passed away of terminal cancer just days after his son Paul and wife Maggie were murdered. So it's a reputation and a name there in Hampton, very small town. Everyone knows this family. So as you can imagine, lots of speculation and rumors and connections on how all of these accusations are connecting somehow to one family name.
Yeah, and I'm sure people know stuff because they do talk. It is a smaller community. Imran, one of the things that just makes me pay attention to is the fact that from all accounts, and they've been very actively reporting what they can, law enforcement is actively pursuing all of these different leads and cases and investigations and reopening. And I think that that is such a great thing to see when you have a smaller community where everybody knows each other.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could imagine that this is the talk of not just the town, but it's the talk of the country. As you said, you look at the news wires and people are talking about this family, talking about what's going on in South Carolina. Now, law enforcement is coming in. They're looking at all these incidents in the past. There's a new spotlight on some things that happened in the past. And we're going to see as things progress, because you not only have the spotlight of law enforcement on these incidents and this family, but now the spotlight of the press and the country. Very interested to know what's going on in that small town in South Carolina. And I think we're going to see, as law enforcement investigates, some of those questions being answered.
I would agree with you, and we're certainly going to continue providing any information as we learn it here on Court TV. Imran, you're going to stay with me. And Shanley, I know that you're going to be back with me later on in the show. The death penalty arson trial is expected to resume Monday with closing arguments. When we return, we're going to take a look at the prosecution's case and the evidence they presented in Ohio versus Stanley Ford. Good Thursday afternoon and welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott. The state and the defense have rested in the trial of Stanley Ford, who is charged with 29 counts, which include arson and murder of 9 people in 2 separate house fires. If convicted, he could potentially face the death penalty. Court is expected to resume in Ohio on Monday, when we expect closing arguments to begin. The defense rested after calling 1 witness outside the presence of the jury, who then pled the 5th. The prosecution, however, presented 39 witnesses over the course of 11 days of court. Let's take a look back at the prosecution's case in Ohio versus Stanley Ford.
719 Fultz was the home of Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart. You're going to hear that as a result of this fire on April 18th, 2016, that Lindell Lewis and Gloria Jeannie Hart lost their lives. On May 15th of 2017, Zenaida Ford, the defendant's wife, calls 911 to report that a house down the street from hers at 693 Fultz was on fire and it was burning. The Akron Fire Department responded. They did their best to put the fire out, but the results were unimaginably worse.
How many people did you actually find?
7. Including 4 people under the age of 13 years of age, and another person, Jared Boggs, who was 14. Can you tell the jury, if you knew, and if you don't, that's okay, of any issues that the defendant, Stanley Ford, was having with Linda Lewis?
They had disagreements all the time.
Me, my sister, no, my daughter, Jeannie was there, and we were grilling.
Okay.
And someone across the street told us we need to go home because we're making too much noise. It was only like 3 or 4 of us.
He said that Lindell was a vicious guy?
Yes.
All right. And that when people would walk by their house, people would verbally attack him. Or they would verbally attack the people as they walked by the house.
That's correct. Ultimately, did you make an opinion as to whether this was an accidental or intentionally set fire?
Yes, I did.
All right. What was that opinion?
That it was an incendiary fire, that it was an intentionally set fire.
And where would the origin have been?
The origin would have been on the front porch of the house.
And when the police came to you that night, did you tell them who you thought had done?
Yes, I did.
Had committed this fire?
Yes, I did.
Who did you tell them you believe did this?
The man across the street.
Right now you just used your thumb to point.
Yes, sir.
Who did you point at?
Stan.
So the night of the fire when the police asked you about who you thought did it, and you said Stan.
Yeah.
Why did you tell them Stan?
Because I heard her arguing with somebody. I know she wasn't arguing with Lindell. She was arguing with somebody. Because Lindell hollered down and said, "Leave that alone." So she was talking to somebody else, He told her to leave it alone.
Did you have a chance to respond to a fire at 693 Fultz in the city of Akron on that date?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And roughly, do you know what time you were called to that location?
I believe it was about 2:30 in the morning.
Okay. And when you responded to the scene, can you tell the jury what you saw?
When we arrived on scene, the house on Fulton Street was completely involved in fire.
When he gave you that address, did that raise any interest in you?
Yes, it did.
And why was that?
Well, first of all, I had prior knowledge of the first fire that had happened at 714.
Okay.
Excuse me, not 719, I believe.
719?
719.
Okay.
I had prior knowledge of that fire and the investigation. So when I heard faults and fatalities, it instantly, you know, it was like a red flag almost. It jumped off me. I said, oh no, not again.
You said the baby was with the mother.
Correct.
All right. And then who else did you find? And I know you don't necessarily know the names, but.
Sure. Like I said, it appeared the mom was holding the infant, and then we saw the teenage son in the stairwell. So there's those three, and then the family pet. What you couldn't really see, we saw the face of the one child kind of underneath Dad's chest, but then there was two other small children that were underneath him as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair to say it's not a pleasant process?
No, it was not pleasant at all.
Based on the scene examination, the fire patterns, and the information obtained through the course of the investigation, we determined that the fire was intentionally set. It was like a deja vu because we'd already done a fire about a year ago on Fultz.
Do you recall ever having a conversation with the defendant, Stanley Ford, about the residents of that house?
He mentioned to me on my way to the gas station that there was a little boy that lived in the house that was breaking off rear view mirrors. I mean the side view mirrors.
Camera 2, 2:43 a.m., movement visible. 1:41 a.m., individual running, frame left.
Okay. And you describe it as running. Is that based on when you watch the video, you can tell they're moving a little bit quicker than walking?
Yes.
So do you have anything that we need to know about or anything in there that's dangerous ordinance, so we don't... I got gas and stuff like that. What kind of gas? For the lawnmower. Where is it? It's in the basement.
Do you recall from the search warrant whether there was lighter fluid found?
Yes. Charcoal lighter fluid, yes.
When the defendant gets angry with his neighbors, he sets their property on fire and he kills them. And at the conclusion of this case, Mr. LaPrinzi and I are going to ask you to find the defendant guilty of all the charges and all the specifications.
Let's bring back former prosecutor trial attorney Imran Ansari. Thank you so much for still being with me. This is interesting, and Brian Prim, producer, just gave me all this great information that I want to share with you in logistics, because we know 29 charges against this defendant. We know there were 3 fires. We know there was evidence of the horrific tragedy and loss of life as a result of 2 of those house fires. We know that he is potentially facing the death penalty. The jury was never sequestered during the course of the trial. However, we know that Monday, when they come back, there will be jury sequestration for the duration of their deliberations. So let me just start with that one little logistical detail and ask you if that surprises you or if you think that's unusual or not.
Yeah, Ashley, normally if a jury is going to be sequestered, they will be sequestered during the duration of the trial, especially when there is a trial which is being televised and covered by the press to a great degree. And we know that the Stanley Ford trial was one of those sort of trials. So it does surprise me that at the last stage, and that would be the deliberations of this trial, and while they're deliberating and rendering their verdict, that the court decided to sequester this jury at this time, rather than a sequestration during the course of the trial. So it is a little surprising that sort of at the end game, if you will, the court has decided to sequester the jury.
And I'm wondering if it's because, from my understanding, again, these are all the details that I've been provided, which is great because they anticipate the court rather said to the jury, we anticipate you will go until 7 or 8 each night. You will be sequestered in a hotel. You will have no devices, no electronics, no TVs, no access to telephones, and any calls will be monitored. So it's really going above and beyond. And I'm wondering if this is done in part to say, jury, it's very serious, obviously, when any jury deliberates, but we want you to be able to focus on this and nothing else. You can stay late. You're going to sleep in a hotel because this needs to be your focus. Could that be any of the reason, perhaps, that they are going to be sequestered?
Yeah, I mean, the court could be taking that into consideration. Sequestration is something that is not as routine as it used to be. And that sort of belies the fact that information is now more readily available and it's at people's fingertips. You would think that more juries would be sequestered in this day of information so they wouldn't be tainted, so to say, by the outside sphere and information which is so readily available. But this court seems to be taking into consideration that they want this jury to be considering the evidence in a very focused manner, and that's why they've decided to sequester the jury. Do I think that this jury is going to take a long time to render a verdict? Well, actually, I don't think so. This is a case where you have a motive that has been brought out by the prosecution of a neighbor who took his disagreements to another extreme, which resulted in the loss of life of 9 people, including children. Stanley Ford has put on a sort of defense, if you will, that it wasn't him. They pointed to an empty chair. They talked about Patrick Boggs, who was the estranged husband of one of the victims. But I don't think that they really hit home the defense for Stanley Ford to point to someone else other than him in this case. And we're going to see with the closing arguments how both parties wrap it up. But the jury will be sequestered, as you mentioned, and they will have ample opportunity to deliberate in a focused manner, and we'll all be waiting to see the verdict in this case.
Absolutely. That all starts on Monday. Certainly, we're going to bring it to you live here on Court TV. And Imran, I just must say thank you for being a guest with us. We know each other from New York, but I also know that you worked on the original Court TV, so I'm so appreciative of your time today.
No problem, Ashley. Always great being on with you.
Thank you so much. We are covering 3 trials at Court TV, and when we return, we look at what we can expect tomorrow with Court TV legal correspondents Chanley Painter and Julia Janae. Court TV is covering 3 big trials that are nearing their end. In Ohio, closing arguments are expected to begin Monday morning in the death penalty arson trial of Stanley Ford. The jury will continue their deliberations tomorrow in the Jinx murder trial out of California. And in New York, the testimony in the sex trafficking trial of R. Kelly will resume tomorrow. Of course, so grateful to have Court TV legal correspondents Chanley Painter and Julia Janae to discuss what we can expect tomorrow in California and New York. All right, Chanley, if I could start with you, please, in terms of Durst and what we expect tomorrow.
Well, the deliberations will pick back up a little bit later, start again on Friday, 1:30 local, that's 4:30 Eastern. They will have a few hours to deliberate till around 7:30 p.m. Eastern. If they don't reach a verdict, we may be here next week for this jury to keep deliberating the fate of Robert Durst. They have several things, of course, to consider back there in the deliberation room and in the verdict forms. Of course, the murder count, those special circumstances, and a lot of evidence, 18 weeks of evidence for them to sort through and to reach a consensus on, Ashley.
All right, and Chanley, let me just confirm, although it's been 2 days of deliberations, it's only been less than 6 hours thus far. Is that right?
That is correct. So they deliberated probably half a day each the last couple of days, which is a little under 6 hours total so far. But we did actually hear from the jury yesterday. Actually, when they sent a note to the judge, they requested a demonstrative aid that prosecutor Habib Balian used in his closing argument. It was a calendar timeline featuring the month of November 2000 that was leading up to her murder in December of 2000. Key moments, really trying to show some motive as to why Robert Durst would want to do away with his friend Susan Berman, all about that reinvestigation into Kathy Durst's disappearance and Susan's alleged role in that. It was a powerful piece of demonstrative aid, but it was not evidence, so the judge said, no, jury, you can't have that back there with them. This was not evidence for you to consider.
All right, Julia, what do we expect in New York and R. Kelly?
Judge Ashley, we could hear the words, the government rests tomorrow. That is what we have been expecting, anticipating that they would wrap up their case in chief this week. So tomorrow would be the last day to do that. There have been a lot of questions of how they are going to end their case. They have been going on now. It'll be 18 days tomorrow. They have called 43 prosecution witnesses to the stand, and it's been a mix of people. They've called a number of accusers, 5 of whom are part of the indictment. Then they've had other accusers who are those who are supporting that information, their prior sexual acts or acts of abuse that are alleged in this case. And they've also called a lot of former employees of this defendant to talk about the rules and protocols and the way that he was controlling in this sex trafficking trial. So the prosecution does have a tall order before them in proving that this was racketeering and that these were violations of the Mann Act federally. But overall, they could call another accuser. There are some that have not been called that were listed in a motion in limine. We thought that with the case agent on the stand yesterday, that was going to be the way they wrapped up their case. It was a really impactful, strong way to show this jury the extent of their investigation with Homeland Security and also letting these jurors listen to recordings of the defendant.
All right, and I really appreciate both of you because you always also give us the color of the court and what's going on there live. Thank you to both of you for being with us today. This is it for me. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, but do not go anywhere because Joy Lim Nakrin will take over the anchor chair and give you all the highlights and the latest cases here at Court TV, your front row seat to justice.